Our God is full of infinite wisdom and unmatched power. And because of that, I encourage you today, release your worries, release your fears, and place everything that you cannot control into God's hands. Have you ever tried to control something so deeply and then realized it was never in your control to begin with? Picture this. You are sitting in a small boat and suddenly you find yourself in the middle of a violent storm. The waves are rising, the wind is roaring, and your strength feels useless. You cannot stop the storm. You cannot command the sea. But what if I told you there is someone who can? That is exactly how life often feels. We land in situations that are far beyond our control. Just like that storm, they shake us, confuse us, and sometimes even frighten us. But in those moments, we forget something powerful. We always have a choice. Maybe not the ability to control the storm, but the ability to decide who we trust in the storm. We can either worry, stress, and try to fix everything in our own strength, or we can surrender and trust the one who has authority over even the wind and the waves. As humans, we naturally desire control. It gives us a false sense of safety. We feel secure when things are in our hands. But life gently reminds us again and again, we are not as in control as we think we are. God is the creator of the universe. He holds everything together. We are not the authors of the story, but we are part of his divine plan. Job 26:7 reminds us that God stretches out the north over empty space and hangs the earth on nothing. That is the level of his power. And Ecclesiastes 3:1 tells us there is a time for everything under heaven. In other words, life is full of seasons we cannot predict or control. We cannot control the rain. We cannot control the wind. And just like that, there are many moments in life that are simply beyond our grasp. When we try to control everything, we slowly drain ourselves, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Because we were never designed to carry that weight alone. Ecclesiastes reminds us again, there is a time for everything. And sometimes that time is not to hold on tighter, but to let go. Not because we are helpless, but because we are wise enough to trust God. So why should we surrender to him? Because God's wisdom is limitless, and his understanding has no boundaries. Psalm 147:5 says, his understanding is beyond measure. He sees what we cannot see. He knows what we cannot know. And he understands what we cannot understand. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us that his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and his ways are higher than our ways. So even when life feels confusing, we can rest in this truth: God is never confused. Surrender is not defeat. It is trust in action. It is saying, God, I cannot handle this alone, so I place it in your hands. The Bible is filled with people who reach that same point of surrender. Take Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles 20. When a massive army came against him, fear filled the land. But instead of relying on human strength, he turned to God and said, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. That is surrender. And God responded with victory so powerful that the enemy destroyed themselves without Israel lifting a sword. Now think about King Hezekiah in 2 Kings 20. When he was told he was going to die, he didn't surrender to fear. He surrendered to God in prayer. And God extended his life by 15 years. That is what happens when we place the uncontrollable in God's hands. We experience a peace that cannot be explained logically. Philippians 4:7 calls it a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that guards our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And that peace is not based on circumstances. It is based on trust. Psalm 34:18 reminds us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. So even in your lowest moments, you are not abandoned. You are held. When we surrender to God, something beautiful happens. We sleep without fear. We walk without anxiety, and we face tomorrow without being overwhelmed. Because our confidence is not in what we see, but in who God is. As the song says, because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Now, surrender does not mean storms disappear immediately. It means you are not alone in the storm. The Israelites in the wilderness saw God provide manna from heaven, even when they doubted Him. That is faithfulness beyond human understanding. And if God provided then, He will provide now. 1 Peter 5:7 tells us to cast all our anxiety on Him because He cares for us. Casting means transferring the weight, moving it from your shoulders to His. Prayer is the bridge of that transfer. It is simply saying, God, I cannot carry this anymore. I give it to you. And when you truly do that, something shifts inside you. The pressure does not disappear instantly, but the peace begins to grow. Now consider the story of Jericho in Joshua. The walls were massive, impossible to break by human strength. But God's instruction was simple. March, trust, obey. And when they surrendered their logic and followed God's direction, the walls fell. That is how surrender works in our lives too. Some problems are not meant to be solved by force, but by faith. Some doors are not opened by struggle, but by trust. So today, remember this truth. The things you cannot control are not meant to destroy you. They are meant to teach you dependence on God. From this moment onward, learn to place your worries where they belong, in God's hands. Because He has never failed, and He will not start with you. Remember Jehoshaphat. Remember manna in the wilderness. Remember Jericho's walls. And above all, remember this: when you surrender, God takes over. And when God takes over, nothing remains impossible. Now, to all those within the sound of my voice, let us go to the Lord in prayer.